Hello everyone, this is Mr. Reimer. This video is a reteach of our Unit 2 DOL 1 entitled Early Trade Routes. Our objective, remember, was to explain the diffusion of the major ideas in mathematics, science, and technology that originated in the River Valley civilizations by providing a written response to a question. Let me begin by saying I saw a lot of struggle in the responses that I received. And I think it has to do with the fact that for the first time maybe ever, a teacher asked you to apply what you had learned and simply just recall information or remember information, write it down from some text, put it in the box, circle the right answer. A lot of the things that you did in middle school history, right? In high school, especially in my class, teachers are going to ask you to not only learn some knowledge, learn a new skill, but then use it in some new situation, right? That's true learning. So, and remember, in our lesson, I taught you about the nomadic groups and the Phoenicians. And you're like, but that has nothing to do with the objective. Well, it does. Remember, I taught you how that they were the main facilitators of trade, right? Going back to our objective, they're the ones diffusing these major ideas. And in the question, if we look down here at the question, I asked you to then think of the parts of the world that were excluded from those early trade networks, that were not a part of those early trading networks, and answer the question of how might their exclusion have affected the development of these areas. So yeah, it's a lot of balls in the air that you're juggling. There's a lot of moving parts, but it's these kinds of complex questions that I'm going to ask you in this class, because I want to stretch you and I want you to grow as learners. So let's look at some examples of students that did poorly, but then some students who did well. We had a little of both. All right. A lot of the beginning understanding responses that I saw were very similar to responses we talked about earlier. Students just didn't answer the question. In this example, the person wrote, the parts of the world that were excluded from the early trade networks were mathematics, science, and technology. That's not even parts of the world. Their exclusion affected the development of these areas by the 5th country BC because they made jugs, and Paris, that's where the jugs are at the time. So the student is trying to just recall information, it looks like, from the lesson, but not answering the question. And I saw a lot of this in the responses. You must answer the question that's being asked, not some other question that you make up. All right. Let's go to the emerging understanding. Remember, this is the passing score. Australia was excluded from the early trade networks. Very good. Factual statement. Its exclusion affected the development of the areas by economic systems and social development. So remember also in this lesson, I introduced you to the idea of making an argument. We are working towards writing a thesis statement by the end of this unit. A thesis statement is simply an argument in response to a historical question with lines of reasoning, with main points. Okay, but those main points, they need to be defensible. They need to be more specific than this student is saying. Development in the areas of economic systems and social development is too broad. You know, think about the story of Goldilocks and the three bears, right? Some porridge was too hot, some was too cold, and some was just right. This is an example of specificity that's too hot or too cold. There's not enough here for an argument. So I couldn't get it more than the emerging. All right, in the proficient understanding, the student wrote this. The parts of the world that were excluded from the early trade networks were Europe. Excellent, factual statement. I would have been maybe a little bit better to say Northern Europe, because Southern Europe through the Phoenicians was a little bit connected, but I took it. Their exclusion affected the development of these areas by resources and poverty. All right. Getting a little bit better in specificity, right? I still need some verbs though. So resources, like what's going on with these resources? Tell me more. And poverty, tell me more. You can't, it's one word is not quite enough specificity. It's still too cold. We're looking for it just right. And if you're like, I need to see an example, the advanced understanding is going to give us that example. Here's what the student wrote. The parts of the world that were excluded from the early trade routes were Europe and Africa. Factual statement, though again, the Mediterranean, which encompasses North Africa and Southern Europe, were a part of the trading networks. So a little bit more specificity here, like Sub-Saharan Africa or Northern Europe would have been better. I want you to apply what you learned in geography last year. All right. Their exclusion affected the development of these areas by less goods coming in. That's just right. Enough specificity to make it an argument, but not too much that you're writing everything in your first sentence. And less people spreading their culture since less interaction. Oh, so good. So not only are they giving just the right amount of specificity, but they're connecting it to the themes, but in more specific ways than that emerging understanding student was doing, right? Less goods coming in, clearly in the theme of economic systems, and less people spreading their culture, clearly in the area of cultural interactions, okay? So this is going to take a lot of work, guys. I know it is. It's hard work, but I can get you there. If you listen and you're applying what I'm telling you, you're going to become excellent historical writers, because you're going to be able to craft an argument and then support it with evidence. That's where we're going in this class. So keep working hard, and I'll see you next time.